All right, so I'm here today with Saleh Stevens, is the owner of Continental Clinical, and we're going to talk a little bit about your upbringing and then what led you to Continental Clinical and what that company is all about. So Saleh, welcome aboard.
Hey, Mike, thanks for having me. Glad to be here. I can jump right in talking about my background. I'm originally from Bethesda, Maryland. Grew up, spent a lot of time in the sort of mid-Atlantic area. Went to school in the DC area and ended up going to college in Connecticut at Wesleyan University. Great time, great liberal arts school, prepared me for a lot of life. Then I went to law school out in Southern California, which also prepared me for life, both professionally and socially, because Southern California has a lot to offer. But believe it or not, I came back to the East Coast. I'm actually an East Coaster. I'm not a West Coaster, as much as I love it and as much as I wish I had the freedom to be there, ad nauseum. I'm back here in Maryland with the wife and kids having a grand old time. After law school, I lived all around New York City, did the New York thing for a while, also lived in Philly, spent some time in Europe. And then I practiced law for just short of 15 years. Did sort of a corporate surety finance type stuff. And then I transitioned into a new career at Continental. And the interesting thing about my transition is that it's sort of different in that what we do now is we help pharmaceutical companies get FDA approval for their medications. So with COVID being out, there are a lot of interesting sort of news tidbits and exciting parts that were relating to clinical trials. So it's really a fun time to be in clinical research right now.
So your company is one of the ones, I remember years ago, like I did I went to some thing to like give blood or something, and it was, you were going to get paid for it. And the reason is because they wanted to take my blood and sort of put it into one of these trials, I guess, for a drug. Is that what your company does?
No, not quite like that. Although, not to cast aspersions on wherever you were, that sounds a little dicey. But so first, let me go backwards. So anytime you join a clinical trial, you are given a lot of information about the medication, about the trial, about study visits, things that you're going to do in that regard. And it's presented to you almost in the form of like a contract. And it's not legal. It's very plain English for everyone understands that they know what they're getting into. So when you say that you were giving blood and then you weren't really sure what was going on, that's never the case with clinical trials anymore. It's a very transparent process. So that was that. But on the what we do side, something similar. So when drug companies are trying to get FDA approval, they farm out their data collection to companies like myself, where we use the protocol, which is basically a design of the study and how they want things investigated and data collected. And I hire doctors, scientists, medical staff, and then we also recruit patients into the study. So we recruit these patients into our studies. We perform sort of all the medical activities related to collecting data, administering medications, and then obviously tracking their health. And then we summarize that data, and then we scoot it back over to the pharmaceutical companies, who then in turn give it to the FDA, for the FDA to say that there's efficacy here or there's safety issue there. So either you may get approved, you may get rejected, or you may be asked to resubmit or redesign. So that's kind of what we do. It's a little bit of science, a little bit of sales, a little bit of IT data stuff.
So when you're recruiting people, are you getting referrals from the doctors that you have relationships with, or you have to like just run ads?
So it's a little bit of both, right? So, obviously a great doctor will have his own or her own following of patients that would want to participate. We also have ads that are run off of national campaigns. They're not necessarily run by, my company, but they're run by the pharmaceutical companies who have greater reach with their advertising money, and then they're sort of sourced to us. That's really how that works. And then by word of mouth, you'd be surprised that there's such a large niche culture of people that are looking for alternative treatments for their different ailments in different therapeutic areas. So we do a little bit of both.
And so is the trial, is it like supervised by doctors and nurses?
Yep, doctors, nurses, ethics review boards, we call them IRBs. So we've got institutional review boards that always look at study design, study safety. You're still submitting data to the FDA, so you've also got the final oversight of the FDA. There are lots of checkpoints. I mean, you've got health professionals from nurses and phlebotomists that are trained and certified to do clinical research, all the way up to the doctors, all the way up to the scientists, all the way up to even the data analysts that process the data. So there's always going to be supervision and touch points to make sure everyone is perfectly governed and hopefully very safe.
So you mentioned COVID. Were you one of the labs sort of participating in early COVID vaccine testing?
That's a great question. We had a lot of opportunities with regards to COVID. There was a lot of money thrown at research for COVID, but for us, we shied away from COVID because one, was a lot of sort of infrastructure changes we have to do. Also, in recognition of our own staff, their safety, the continued health of subjects that we have, and myriad other studies, we didn't want to have an overlap having COVID studies in addition to other therapeutic areas. One, just like I said, out of respect internally for the staff, and then for other people that were, joining other clinical studies that we already had going on.
Okay. So some of your studies, are they just like a day-long study, or do you have like times where it's like you put people like in quarantine for like a week to get results?
Right, Mike. So these are outpatient studies, and they can last anywhere from months to years. Okay, so remember, what we're trying to do is make sure that we have medications that are safe with short-term and long-term tails. So studies last as long as, pretty much as long as the finances can hold the pharmaceutical company viable, so that they can get enough data that the FDA is ready to approve them. So we have studies that have gone on for 5 years, 6 years, patients coming in everywhere from once a week to once a month to a couple times a year to once a year for follow-up. These studies are usually pretty significant in their length. Also, it varies on what phase of the trial it's in. But yeah, these studies are just in and out day studies. Although those do exist, we don't really have to do any of those. Every once in a while, we may pick up one and we think that it's one that we can successfully perform and recruit for.
So what's like the most number of people you've had participate in a trial?
Wow. Let's see here. So keep in mind this: when you have a study, they want subjects from various backgrounds, right? So they never want hundreds and hundreds of people coming from one target area, right? Because that might not be representative of all the people taking the medication. So usually, in phase 2, phase 3 studies, we're right around the 20 to 30 person mark in each study. That's kind of where you end up, sometimes a little bit shorter. And it depends on the indication, because a lot of times we're looking at a disease or diseases that aren't necessarily commonplace. So there's just not a huge population of them out there. But I'd say usually the 20 to 30, maybe 40 mark, that's kind of that's a high-end study, and you've got that many people coming back over the course of months, if not years.
Gotcha. So when I'm reading about like a new FDA-approved drug or something, and it's like, oh, in clinical trials, you could be one of the companies behind that.
Yes, often we are. It's kind of neat to look at TV. If like a new medication is out, I can say, oh yeah, we helped with some of that data. We helped such and such company get approval for that drug. So yes, often there are companies like myself that are sort of in the background of putting these helping these studies helpful to the on the market.
Cool. Well, before we wrapped up, I want to go back to the beginning. And I think you mentioned that you were a lawyer, and now you're doing clinical labs. Like, how did you make that transition? Where did the idea come from to get this started?
Well, not to get into too much, this is more like an encore career. Obviously there are times when you just transition into new endeavors. And I will say that I definitely had some family that was definitely in healthcare, so we were very familiar with, the impact that medicine has on the healthcare pipeline. And I saw a space that I thought would be one where I could both, obviously make some money because that's important. We all have, mouths to feed, but also one that would be helpful for the community and just mankind in general. So, we just found a niche, and fortunately, the practice of law sort of prepares you for a lot, not just reading contracts, but also just thinking pragmatically about how things fit and how they play out. And so I just kind of slowly work my way into this. It's a great place to be after, struggling to make ends meet, with the company, and now it's, got the offices moving very well.
Cool. So this is a little bit of a passion project for you.
I'm sorry, say that again?
So it's a little bit of a passion project for you.
Indeed. And if it wasn't before, it certainly is now.
Right. Well, Saleh, it's great to have you. Thanks a lot for your time today. I appreciate it.
Mike, I appreciate it. It was a great chat.